Welcome to TacosandGeeks.com. Justin here, back with more film reviews, and today we're going to be reviewing the documentary simply entitled Stan Lee, which you can now watch on Disney Plus. As always, I give you a brief synopsis, so here we go. Told via a plethora of interviews and audio recordings from Stan Lee himself, the documentary dives back into his beginnings to joining the world of comics and eventually going on to create characters readers and audience members around the world know and love, such as Spider Man, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, the Avengers, Captain America, and much, much, much more. Now, for me, when it comes to, I'm a big Stan Lee fan. Obviously, I'm a comic book writer. Some of you who have followed this channel, I have three indie comic books out right now. I mean, you can follow my imaginative visions. You can see all that stuff from Cry Hero to My Name is Rachel, but this is not a shameless plug, and that's neither here or there. Just giving you a little bit of my background on my experience of why I look up to Stan Lee just from a storytelling standpoint, and why sometimes I approach my stories in a very similar way. And I will recommend this documentary for anyone who is looking to get into comics or are doing their own indie comics as well, because watching this documentary, for me personally, just knowing the state of comic books in the mainstream, obviously the indies are thriving, but just the state of mainstream comics, and not just talking about sales, I'm talking about the quality of books that come out there. This will reinvigorate your love for the art form, because Stanley definitely loved the art. And I'm just not talking about comics in general. I'm just talking about the art of storytelling. And Stanley really did love the art of storytelling and wanting to be able to tell stories that the audience and readers are able to connect with. When it comes from a documentary standpoint, Stan Lee has a couple of documentaries out there. So, unfortunately, this particular documentary does not do anything new under the sun. For people who have never seen a Stan Lee documentary, this is actually a good starting point to do, because they cover a very, very well detailed of this man's career from his early beginnings, living in about his parents moving to America, him being inspired, him growing up during the Great Depression, during the Depression era, him writing his first comic book, him being able to, Jack Kirby and them left from where they were working with, when they were working together, and him becoming the editor of that particular publication. And they cover all the bases, and eventually how they got the name Marvel. So they cover all the basic things that you really need to know about the man. But if you've seen other documentaries, especially the 2010 documentary, this is nothing new under the sun. They do dwell a little bit more on his relationship with Joan, showing more new clips that some of us have never seen, which I thought was really good. And I love the story of how he met Joan. I thought that he did a really good job of really covering that aspect of it. But it's nothing new under the sun. If you're a Marvel fan, if you're a DC fan, if you're a comic fan, if you've seen documentaries of Stan Lee, information wise, there's nothing new under the sun. But I will say this, it's well directed. I love the way they use his audio clips, his interviews, and footage, and using those clips to have him himself narrate his story. So I thought that was pretty clever the way they did that. Instead of having someone from the MCU narrate the story of Stan Lee, they had Stan Lee do it himself. So points for that. And I also did like the way when Stan was telling his story, instead of actually using clips or stock footage, they did something unique here. They used figurines and did a little bit of animation there, or still movements, to illustrate his life. And I thought that was very enjoyable to watch as well. Um, I would say just watching it, it does kind of feel bittersweet, because like I was saying earlier, as a comic book writer myself, who's inspired by Stanley, his characters, and everything else, and you see the love that he has for this art form. You see the love of storytelling that it just oozes through this film, and you can't help but feel like, man, like I mean, seriously, like really, literally, after this recording, this review, I'm shutting everything off, and I'm just literally going to just start writing, continue writing my next two books. And just because I was just been so inspired about the way he approaches characters, the way he wants to present them to the audience to make something relatable. And it's just like it just shows his genius of how he's able to illustrate and articulate and visually depict not only human emotions, the human condition, and just what we as humans go through on a daily basis. And you see that in these characters such as Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, the X-Men, definitely one of my favorites. And it really is a love letter, not just to Stan Lee, but it's a celebration of Marvel. And of course, this is produced by Marvel Studios too. So of course, they have taken some liberties. They're not going to go through a little bit of the details, the business practices of Marvel and things like that. I mean, they do take one or two shots at DC. For you DC fans, you might be like, "Oh my gosh, of course." But at the time, Marvel was the driving force, and DC wasn't really in certain areas, wasn't telling the stories that Marvel was telling. This is coming from a DC guy. But overall, I will have to say that this is a really enjoyable but safe documentary. It's nothing new on the sun. Doesn't offer you anything new if you are a Marvel or Stan Lee fan who have seen other stories or read his books and autobiographies and things like that. It's nothing new when it comes to new information. But for the new people, I will say, who are new to Marvel, new to comic books, you're gonna watch this and go, man, this is inspiring. This is, this is the reason why I'm really interested in Marvel, and just to hear some of the stories of how he came up with certain concepts. Really love, like, X Men is my favorite. Besides Spider Man, X Men is my favorite Marvel property, and I love always hearing about what inspired the X Men and if you, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you do your research, you know what inspired the X Men. And for me, it's always been like, yeah, that's X Men is definitely the one that for me really hits home. But overall, I'm gonna give this a solid. I'm gonna do star ratings for this one. I'm gonna give this 3.5 stars out of 5, mainly because it's a good documentary, but there's nothing new under the sun here, and it doesn't really provide much more information that we didn't know about Stan Lee in general. Obviously, this is produced by Marvel, so Marvel is going to take liberties, of course, with the father or the god of Marvel. They're going to take liberties with this, and but it's a really good documentary, but safe. They did touch a little bit on his riff with Steve Ditko, with him and Steve going back and forth on who's the true creator of Spider-Man. So they kind of glossed over it, but they did touch on it. They did show a little bit of riff with him and Jack Kirby. I thought they was gonna go a little bit more detailed on some of the stress that he had to deal with, but they really glossed over that. They was just they had people doing interviews like, oh, he never really showed some signs of stress. I mean, everybody gets stressed, but I wanted to see a little bit more of the man Stan Lee instead of the persona that we know as the father of Marvel, and we didn't really get that here. We got this kind of the same thing that we're used to seeing when it comes to Stan Lee, when it comes to documentaries about the father of Marvel. But overall, it is a good documentary, but I felt like it played it safe. And I wanted to, and what I mean by play it safe, I'm not saying I wanted something to show flaws of Stan Lee, but I wanted a little bit more in-depth look of the man behind everything besides this, of how he created. A little bit more of his personal life. They touched a little bit about the Joan, about him and his wife Joan, their relationship, unfortunately him losing his child and things like that. I wanted to see a little bit more of that to to know who Stan Lee was. And we didn't really get that here, but overall, I enjoyed the documentary for what it was. If you did, comment below, let me know. What did you think of Stan Lee on Disney Plus? This is Justin from TacosTheGeeks.com. If you like what we do here, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're watching this on TacosTheGeeks.com, thank you for visiting the website. Check out everything else that we're doing here. And stay tuned for more Comic-Con coverage that we're going to be doing. I have a huge slate this summer, so be on the lookout for that. And that's it. I'll catch you on the next one. Later days. Peace.